Hey there! So recently, two of Capcom's biggest hits from back in the day, that being almost 20 years ago, were released again a year apart in the form of a remake and a deluxe remaster, that being Resident Evil 4 Remake from last year and this year's surprise announcement of Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster. And of course, when it comes to remakes, or even the remaster sort of culture, it's going to be controversy, differences, and a lot of different problems between them. So today I'm just going to give you my little perspective on Capcom's recent changes to these classics. And this goes without saying, if a game is a remake of an original classic, it's still going to kick ass gameplay-wise. You know it, I know it, we all know it, don't we? And sure, having some new graphical upgrades is always a plus, and a lot of other modern fidelity elements. But I recently rewatched one of my favorite films of all time, that being 1987's RoboCop. Dead or alive, you're coming with me. Anyway, RoboCop is a classic, but it also had its own remake, that being 2014's RoboCop. And rewatching RoboCop once again, just out of the blue, started to get me to kind of think more about Capcom and its recent remakes. Namely, how I think that Resident Evil 4 2023 and Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster 2024, well, suffice to say, they remind me a bit more of RoboCop 2014 than their original counterparts. Now, why is that? Well, of course, new effects and all kinds of other great modern upgrades are always a plus, as I said. However, there's just some commonality I've noticed, that being if you look at the original RoboCop, the original RE4, the original DR, all three of those projects, while one was a film and the other three were video games, they have this in common. They went through a bit of a troublesome production, to say the least. You know, RoboCop had a bunch of issues with getting the suit right, alongside other things. RE4 had a whole scrap build, or a couple, until we got what we got today. And of course, if you follow a lot of channels showcasing Dead Rising's development, you know that game also went through a bunch of changes, revisions, just to get to the game we got in 2006, alright? So those are those three projects. And then you flash forward to the remakes for all three of them, and of course, you know, in the modern times we live in, we have a lot of time. And when it comes to remakes, we have a lot of hindsight. And there's no doubt that, you know, the remakes of RoboCop, RE4, Dead Rising, they had hindsight and they made some good changes, but the overall package just, I feel like the overall package is something that isn't going to stick out and be as memorable as the original counterparts, if you know what I mean. It's also just a big shame that these remakes lose their bite. By that I mean, of course, the act of censorship itself just sucks and waters everything down. But I think that the dialogue in these original games are just had so much more bite to them. You know, they had that spice, that extra bite, and I think that making the dialogue blander, taking away the, well, villainy, antagonistic nature of the bad guys is such a step down. Not only that, yeah, the voice acting is just not as visceral as the originals. I mean, for crying out loud, the first Dead Rising had Steve Bloom. That's always a plus. And I always give props for new voice actors for trying, of course. But, like I said, these original titles had that bite to them that really helped them stand out. And with the villains being so demeaning over our heroes, well, it hit that much harder when our heroes bounced back and overcame these antagonists. And I gotta say, of course, RE4 Remake and Dead Rising Deluxe they're still gonna kick ass because they're based off the original product or original creation. But are they gonna age as well? You know, when you look at the original RE4, lots of little details, you know. You don't even need to look at the original comparison videos, just go find it yourself. You know, a lot of things, you know, you can copy as much as you want, but a lot of things are going to be left in the dust, you know. And same with Dead Rising. A lot of the coolness factor of that original game, well, sometimes a new graphical upgrade or some quality life enhancements, or even bring back some details from the beta, well, it kind of takes away from just the original game that we actually got, if you know what I mean, the original finished product. And I think that when comparing just the idea of doing a remake, there's going to be a lot of baggage. And as you can see, a lot of the quote-unquote controversies that were with RE4 Remake still carried over to Dead Rising Remake. And, you know, for me, it's not so much as a political issue, you know, the whole woke thing, or, you know, any other side of it. I just think it's kind of a shame that, you know, games that set a precedent back in the day and were expanded upon already in their direct sequels, you know, RE5 and RE6 are kick-ass titles that I love a lot, you know. When you see my channel, RE1 and RE6 especially are my favorites of Resident Evil. And if Dead Rising, my personal favorite would probably have to be Off the Record. You know, I know Off the Record is pretty much, in a way, a reskin, but still its own thing. You know, we got Frank back, and it did its own thing. And the co-op is just incredible. But just looking at the games that set the tone, you know, RE4, original Dead Rising. When you do a remake, of course it's nice to see some things in the sequels implemented, but it's just, you gotta appreciate what they did back in the day, you know? The quote-unquote jankiness, for me, isn't so much as an issue, just being part of the charm. But not only part of the charm, because they are charismatic games, the original, but they are just something that really pioneered a way to just make things even better in the future. And sure, you know, Dead Rising Deluxe adding the ability to skip time is kind of neat, you know, I'm sure it would make a lot of people happy, new fans, but something like that I think takes away from the difficulty of the original, you know what I mean? You know, Dead Rising is a game that always allowed you to do New Game Plus and get better at saving survivors, get better at knowing where weapons spawn, getting better at just using all of Frank's amazing wrestling skills, you know? The benefit of New Game Plus. And I think just making things easier on the first playthrough takes away a lot of fun, the charm, even the charisma. And I do think that, you know, RE4 Remake and DR Remake both having that yellow paint, you know, being another issue we had of RE4 last year, carrying over to Dead Rising where they quite literally spell out this way in yellow paint with an arrow. To me, it's just asinine. I think it's just silly. Don't you think, you know, a lot of things are inherently silly, but doing some straight up Looney Tunes, hey, go this way, doesn't just seem ridiculous, especially with the benefit of modern graphics, right? I don't know, maybe that's just me. You know, it's something to chuckle at and move on, but when you see it happen again, another classic just makes me scratch my head, you know? I just don't get it. And when it comes to the presentation of both games, yeah, I still think the originals knock it out of the park. You know, if I had to describe RE4 in one way, I just love how the original, when you open the case, you have Leon or Ada striking a bunch of badass and sly poses, you know, like they could each just be holding a single grenade or an egg, and they'll be doing some really unique pose that makes their characters stand out. When you look at Frank West in the original, he definitely stood out more, you know. People like to say he was sleazy, and he was, but he still had a good heart. Well, that's the part of Frank West that we love, you know, something that Dead Rising 4 fumbled. And while, of course, Dead Rising Deluxe is a better game than Dead Rising 4, no doubt about that, it's still hard not to just shake the feeling of losing Frank like we did in Dead Rising 4. You know what I mean? Like, sure, he has a lot of the same lines on the remaster, but, you know, he's not Hank East anymore, but he's not Frank West yet. You know what I mean? And that carries over in gameplay. Sure, a lot of the animations I'm glad they kept for the Deluxe remaster, but, you know, it just doesn't say fantastic the same way. You know what I mean? And I think something's lost there, just like with Leon and Ada and the remake. You know, something is lost from the inherent charisma of the original actors. And I think that also having both remakes have characters constantly talking during gameplay, it can be a bit distracting, you know? Like, sure, you could always skip Otis's calls in the original, but I think that just having everyone have spoken lines or saying, hey, you know, pointing out to the character, the playable character, why don't you go check this out, just seems a bit egregious to me, you know? That is another thing that seems more goofier than, you know, it's goofy like the yellow paint. you know, just a little jarring. I do think that for all the good things the remakes do, they do lose that inherent simplicity of the originals, you know, and yeah, I just think the presentation, the voice acting, the inherent pioneering of the originals, and just the charisma is something that a lot of people miss and loved for a reason back in the day. That's why remaking them is a tall order, you know. It's not so much as just, you know, you shouldn't just go in the comments and tell people who have complaints about the remakes, don't tell them to stop crying or, you know, womp womp or wah wah, come on. It goes to both sides, that doesn't get anything done. You know, you're not doing anything special by telling people that. There's a reason people are upset with these remakes, and I can see why. You know, like Capcom recently just re-released the Marvel vs. Capcom collection, another thing I have a lot of fond memories of growing up. And, you know, I can't wait to finally get into that when I have a chance, but it seems like they pretty much left things alone for the most part. And that's why I think remaking RE4 and Dead Rising is a tall order, you know? Whether it's the voice acting, or the new graphics kind of just taken away from the original's elastic simplicity of the animations, and just overall, like, the funness of enjoying being goofy in these horrific settings. You know, like, sure, you're fighting some different form of zombies in both these games, fighting horrific factions of enemies and dastardly psychopaths, but it's hard to remake lightning. You know, you can't catch lightning in the bottle again. I think with Resident Evil and Dead Rising, we're all just hoping for a new title. And yeah, Resident Evil has that coming, but Dead Rising, I think we all just wanted another adventure that was genuine, paved a way forward, because I'm glad that Dead Rising came back in some way, no doubt about that. But it's just hard to not feel like something was missing, you know? I'm sure you yourself can tell me more reasons that you personally might feel like it was hard to just capture that magic from back in the day. And before I end the video, it's not about nostalgia. Because, you know, like I said, I went back and rewatched RoboCop. And I could just see why, I could just feel all the blood, sweat, and tears put into that production. And you could really feel that with the original Resident Evil 4 and Dead Rising. You know, back in the day, they really had to work their asses off to make something magical. Something that people, you know, would talk about in their gaming communities, or even just pop culture in general. Something that would be referenced of later, later titles with earnest enthusiasm and love. That's why, sure, seeing a prettier version of the original game is exciting, but that excitement kind of wears off after a while. And that's why I think the originals will still stand the test of time. Again, not nostalgia, but just their true quality. And I hope going forward, of course, we're going to see more of our franchises, but I hope that they stick to finding what that identity was back then. Stick in the, you know, enjoying the charisma, enjoying the damn sexiness, and just enjoying the beauty of these original masterpieces. But I won't keep you longer. That was my little soapbox. Thanks for watching, and I've got more bigger and better videos coming from Tiger Drop Films. But that's my perspective on this recent issues with Capcom and its remakes. So, thank you for watching, and please take care.